From TRICHOMES.com, I'm Jason Kitamura, and this is Tech in Cannabis. I talk with the game changers in the tech community to gain valuable insights into the future of the fast-paced cannabis industry. Today, we are joined by Jeremy Jacobs, CEO of Enlighten, a company that began its roots by providing digital menus and signage for dispensaries, and now is becoming one of the biggest platforms for cannabis advertising, both in-store and online. Enlighten is positioned to become a Google or Facebook equivalent when it comes to display advertising, but without the restrictions on cannabis. We talk about using high-traffic mainstream outlets like Sports Illustrated and FHM to market cannabis companies, along with what the future holds for technology in our industry. All right, so today we have Jeremy Jacobs with Enlighten. Hi, Jeremy. Thanks for coming on to the show.
Well, Jason, thanks for having me. Excited to be here and talk about cannabis technology with you.
I'm just as excited. So, just first off, I was just curious myself. How did you actually get into, the cannabis space and especially the cannabis tech space? Talk a little bit.
Yeah, it's a kind of interesting story. I started in technology. I was in digital signage and have been since around the year of 2008. 2008, I entered the space putting up advertising screens in restaurants and gyms and high traffic areas like that. 2010, I invented the first digital menu in the United States for a customer over in Corbin, Kentucky, David's Steakhouse. And we started selling that through Cisco Foods as a distributor of ours. So they would work with all of their various clients on our digital menu products specifically. And I had a rep in Colorado and became a good friend of mine. And he calls me one day and he says, this is about 8 years ago, and he says, hey, Colorado's about to recreationally legalize cannabis. And I got a bunch of friends that are up in these cannabis dispensaries. What do you think about making digital menus instead of for chicken sandwiches for marijuana buds? And being a big cannabis advocate and also owning a big tech company, I said, that sounds like probably the coolest thing I've ever heard to do. And so that was the intro into it. And obviously what we do now has grown wildly from just digital menus. But, my story is very simple. I was in the tech space and got introduced to the fact that cannabis was about to take off as its own thing and decided to be brave and bold and enter the space.
All right. For those of you that are listening out there that don't know what Enlighten is, essentially Enlighten, a big part of it is the screens that you see like at the dispensaries, and they're playing some content kind of in the background while you're doing your shopping. I guess you can elaborate more on that.
Yeah, so what Enlighten's really become, and that's definitely the thing I believe, Jason, most people know us for sure. That's the thing we've been the longest, for like 8 years. And so it's really two things. We have a retail technology solution side that started out of that digital menu product, and it just grew wildly as people needed kiosks and they needed more digital signage and video walls and just any sort of a consumer device that would be inside of a dispensary to display inventory or promote things, just anything you can think of. And all of that is encapsulated in a product called Smart Hub that draws in data from about 25 different sources, most of the major POS companies. And with that retail software solutions division, we service most of the MSOs like the Curaleafs and the Veranos and GTIs of the world. And then the other division is the one you're more talking about, which is the marketing and advertising division. And we do have a network of screens in about 1,000 marijuana-related locations that we run advertisements on, full-screen video ads at point of purchase. But also on that marketing side, we now have recently developed a DSP, a demand-side platform for digital advertising, and can accommodate the digital advertising buys for all the brands and dispensaries to target non-cannabis consumers. So there's a retail solution side to our business and sort of a marketing advertising side. And I think we're the largest player in both of those spaces respectively as well.
So that being said, about how many dispensaries would you say your screens are playing?
Yeah, so there's about 1,000 roughly, and there's big concentrations. If you look at the particular areas where cannabis went legal recreationally, because a lot of people say, where are your screens? Well, we followed recreational cannabis. And so as Colorado went first, we have a large amount of screens there, 100 plus. The next to fall was Seattle, Washington, and all of Washington. So we have, 100 plus there, then Oregon, 100 plus there, then California, 100 plus there. And so we followed that trend of legalized cannabis as it went recreational. But all together, there's about 1,000. And there's another 500 or so on top of that 1,000 that are either brands or dispensaries that work with us in another way. So altogether, we've got about 1,500 clients we work with.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. And as I was looking more into your company, and it also seems that you have a lot of like avenues that you could do advertisements that's outside the dispensaries as well. So like on different website platforms and different outlets. Just coming from experience, I know how difficult it is for cannabis companies to advertise on a lot of platforms, especially like Facebook and Google. It seems like you guys have set up something very similar to what Facebook and Google have as far as their ad centers and AdWords and things like that. But it's cannabis friendly and cannabis consumers.
Yeah.
Is that essentially kind of what you've done in a nutshell?
That's kind of I like the way you said that. We sort of did what Google did, but for cannabis centric based business. And it's kind of a funny story of how we got to that. The very beginning of this, when I first visited Colorado to put my boots on the ground and understand what does legal cannabis look like. One of the first things I really observed was that none of these companies could run ads on the TV. They couldn't run ads in the newspaper or the radio. At that time, nobody could use billboards. Now, since billboards have become highly adopted by people like MedMen and Ease and people like that, they spend a lot of money on billboard advertising. There's new restrictions coming in play that are hurting them. But what I noticed was nobody had anywhere to advertise. Facebook wasn't going to take the money. Google wasn't taking the money. You could get nothing out. And that's why we started with the digital ad network, but really made it funny to me, Jason, is I'm driving down the road and I'm on the way to like a LiveWell location. And I pass a sign that says LiveWell has adopted this section of the highway. They were literally adopting highway sections so they could get their logo on some piece of signage in the open world. And it was that ridiculous. And I said, this is insane. And that was 8 years ago. And, very little has changed since then. Try to run a marijuana ad on Facebook or Google or, the television or anywhere for that matter. And you're really stuck down into, our in-screen network inside of dispensaries that's age-gated and the billboard companies. And then, some cannabis-related print publications. And, print's been doing what print's been doing, which is try to go digital. But that's it. It's a closed ecosystem. And what we were able to do was really open that up. And the way that we gather the people that we're targeting, they have already been pre-existingly age-gated. So we know they're over 21. And not only do we know they're over 21, we know they've been in a cannabis dispensary. So the publisher networks that we work with are huge names, like Sports Illustrated, MLB.com, GQ Magazine, and all the different GQ affiliates and Condé Nast companies. And since we're acquiring these consumers, knowing that they're cannabis consumers, they've been a lot friendlier than they would have otherwise. So we built a pretty impressive publisher network of apps that a lot of people use, as well as higher end real estate properties. And when you couple that really good publishing network with known cannabis consumers, really what you've got is an incredible opportunity for cannabis dispensaries and brands to finally be able to reach people. That's really what we've done.
Wow, that's really interesting. Yeah, because in the past, I mean, it's really been like you're either on some sort of weed, website or weed channel, or like on the porn networks and things like that. I know it's like really big for like weed maps and stuff like that. But it's there wasn't really anywhere to go. But it seems like the more you gather strong data, the more opportunity there is, because now that you have that data that's trusted by some of these larger brands like GQ and Sports Illustrated, they're willing to take the bet and say, okay, you'll get in front of the right people, so go ahead and use our network. Is that essentially what's happening?
Yeah, it's sort of that. And really what a lot of it was me having conversations with the legal teams of, whenever you build a supply chain to be able to target people on the internet or on apps, with cannabis advertising, there's a large supply chain there. I have a lot of vendors along the process, a lot of people in the tech stack. And so you have to actually individually sell all of them on what you're doing. And so I spend a lot of time in front of lawyers, and you spend a lot of time presenting to them why there's no risk to them. And I think the big risk, Jason, everybody's trying to avoid is someone that is anti-cannabis, is looking at the internet. All of a sudden, a cannabis ad pops up, and they take a screenshot and tell their senator, call the attorney general. I don't know what they do, but they start throwing flags everywhere. And the next thing you know, everybody that was involved in the chain is in trouble. And so the way to eliminate that is just make sure that the people seeing the ads are the people that would want to see those ads very, very clearly. And that's what we were able to prove along this chain of custody here, that, hey, these are people that do purchase cannabis. Fact, guarantee it, they're cannabis buyers. And we're only targeting them is who we're targeting. And so that really was what changed that game and allowed the comfortability for people to get involved. And we've not had a single complaint, not from any regulatory agency. We follow all the regular laws. There's a lot of laws about cannabis advertising, a tremendous amount, probably more than there should be. And each state is very different. And there's a lot of work that goes into making sure that campaigns comply with those, but we have a great methodology for that. And so, we've been very successful at it.
Wow, that's amazing. And I was looking at some of the statistics. I mean, you're looking at about 200 million consumers that you kind of have kind of targeted. Is that about the number?
Yeah. So there's a total, the total known people that have touched cannabis in some way is around the 200 million mark, at least the number of devices that there's access to. But the more known cannabis consumer is someone that frequents a dispensary. So just because there's a massive audience doesn't mean we actually attack that audience. And that's what's really unique about our data. And you were talking about now that there's more data, there's more opportunity. That's always the case. So now I'm able to not just target people that I know have been to a dispensary once upon a time in their life, but they frequent those dispensaries. And sometimes we even have data on what types of products that they buy. So if you're an edibles company in California and you're new and you only want to talk to edibles consumers in California, we can focus in on that very specific demographic. Maybe you only want to target male edibles consumers in California because your product is very male centric based upon the feedback you've got from the market. And so there's a tremendous amount of data, the same amount of data that anyone would have on any other kind of purchasing behaviors. The same way car lots know you've been to another car lot, and the next thing you know, you start getting car lot advertisements, left and right. The same way that when you go into a Best Buy, the next thing you know, you start seeing advertisements from Amazon's Electronics and Tiger Direct and everybody else that sells televisions. Same sort of concept. We learn about your buying patterns and behaviors through various different relationships that we have, and we know about visit frequency and are able to target the right consumer for that right promotion.
I mean, it seems like you guys are the dominant player in that market. I mean, aside from Google and Facebook itself, in your opinion, do you think platforms like Google and Facebook will ever learn and start, allowing ads like that to start playing on their platforms?
Well, I don't know if it's a learn issue, and I think about this a lot. So I think the answer here is that you're Google and you're worth almost $1 trillion, and your Facebook and your company's worth almost $1 trillion, whatever they're worth right now. And you got several of the richest men in the entire history of the world that are major shareholders of those companies, and cannabis is still technically federally illegal. Now, obviously, there's plenty of states that have adopted it, but the feds say it's illegal. You can't go out and get a normal interstate banking account in cannabis. There's a lot of things you can't do. There's still federal cannabis laws. It's still a Schedule I narcotic, as ridiculous as that is. And that's their concern. They're a global player, and it's just, if you think about how small cannabis is compared to what Facebook and Google's doing, it's just not worth the risk to them, I think, is the thing. And so, that sort of leads you to the next real thought process, which is when it is federally legal, what does that mean for companies, like ours and maybe other people that compete with us? What does that mean for us when Facebook and Google decide to get engaged? Well, obviously they have a huge amount of money, and so they're going to throw their weight around and try to gather resources. But typically what that means is they actually, to gather those resources, they don't want to do the groundwork. They'll just write companies like ours a check to acquire them as a type of mentality that typically the Googles and Facebooks have. So as the industry warms up and it heats up and you see cannabis regulation change on a federal level, I would totally expect the players that are late to the game, they obviously know they're late to the game, they're late to the game for good reasons, to just pay the piper and do what they can to buy the technology and buy in rather than build their own thing. But absolutely, Facebook and Google are interested in taking cannabis money. I mean, the economic impact of the marijuana industry is bigger than football and pizza. I mean, those are two of the most
Yeah.
American things ever, is football and pizza. And the cannabis industry has a larger economic impact than either football or pizza. And so, of course, they want a piece of that money.
Yeah, it seems like it's just natural evolution. But like you said, it's a small percentage of their business. So,
Oh, it's insignificant.
so it's
Yeah,
going to be
it's one industry of a million.
it's going to be a while. So, I mean, a company like yours, I think, is gonna is gonna shine in these times for sure. But that being said,
Maybe they'll write me a check, Jason. Maybe that'll be what happens. Here's for hoping, right?
there it is. Yeah, just they're gonna just look at you guys as a threat pretty soon. So just be ready.
If Facebook or Google looks at me a threat, then I think I've accomplished something in my life. If I'm that threatening, that is the excellent kind of threatening I'd like to be.
Absolutely. Well, taking a look at the flip side, I mean, we obviously see kind of the benefit of using your guys' network to advertise for brands and things like that. But, a lot of your products also have a benefit to the actual dispensary itself. Besides like just the aesthetics of looking modern and having like the cool screens. I mean, I guess kind of, expand a little bit on that.
Yeah, so there's really two major categories of problems that we solve for dispensaries, and they're not small problems either, and they're very unique to cannabis. And so when I talk to people about this, there's normally like this aha moment, like, holy cow, I didn't think about that. So the first problem is that cannabis has been illegal only for 100 years in the history of the world. And it's been around since literally recorded history. 2900 BC, Chinese were the first people recording history. And one of the first recordings is from a Chinese emperor who said that cannabis contained both yin and yang, whatever that means. As a medicine, it contained both yin and yang. And so it's literally one of the first things recorded in documents history. But the 100 years it was illegal happened to also be the 100 years that scientific technology exploded. And so the availability of information really was born during that same 100 years. And so, for all intents and purposes, nobody that's on Earth right now hardly knows anything about cannabis, or at least that was true, roughly 10 years ago. The amount of knowledge that we're gathering now about cannabis is rapidly, accelerating. There's tons of research. I was reading a statistic the other day about the number of pages of cannabis research that are being produced by the minute. And it's insane. And that's awesome that, here's this incredible medicine. But that doesn't change the fact that, most dispensary owners, dispensary managers, dispensary bud tenders, and especially dispensary clientele really don't know much about it. So what education there is needs to be put in front of them. So one of the major things that we do for dispensaries through our television network and another product we call On Demand, which allows you the ability to change what's on the screen by a little remote control. It's got all these educational videos, drilled down into specific folders. So if somebody says, hey, how do you make a concentrate? I got a video for that. Or how does a vape make me feel? Or, how is flour processed into edibles? Any of these questions that somebody would have, or what is it, what are trichomes? What is what is CBD? What are these different things? What's the difference between hemp and marijuana? All these questions, all those are in a repository. So one of those products or the other product helps really break down problem number one, which is absolute utter lack of education. And so we allow dispensaries the ability to disseminate quality education in one way or the other. And some of those products are free and some of them have a small fee to them. But we've opened that up and we've gathered all of these educational videos and built the largest cannabis educational video library in the world to be able to do these things. The other problem that we solve, so one problem is lack of education. And so we really tackled that one really early on because we knew that was going to be the case. And so, really literally, when you got involved in cannabis, what did you know? Indica and sativa and hybrid, and that's probably about it.
Right.
That's kind of what we all knew. And we didn't even really know when we got cannabis what it was. We just, based on how it made you feel, you said, oh, yeah, this must be an indica. And that's like the extent of our cannabis knowledge. The other challenge that we solve for retailers is equally as a big a problem, but it's more of a technical problem. So what's unique about cannabis is there's these tiny little batches of product because each pound of cannabis, if you will, all has its own individual characteristics. It has its own THC composition, its own CBD composition. It varies from batch to batch. And yet they have to keep track of these things and they have to make consumers aware of these things. And, imagine if the chicken industry had to do the same thing, that every 20 pounds of chicken, you had to probe it and figure out how many grams of protein and what sort of things are
Right.
inside of it. And each batch had to be individually labeled. And when Chick-fil-A sold 100 sandwiches, now they got to change the board because the stats about the chicken sandwiches slightly changed. Imagine that. Well, that's exactly what the cannabis industry has to do. And because of that, these tiny batches, they're at extreme sales velocity. So you run out of this stuff constantly and you can't get any more of it. Is it because it was just one batch? And so that creates a problem, creates a lot of problems. It creates a problem in the store when the menu's not updated and somebody just tried to order that product. And then you say, oh, we just ran out of stock of that, after you fumble around in the back looking for it and can't find it. And now they've got to start over looking at the menu, and the people behind them are frustrated, and they're frustrated, and everybody's frustrated, and that's no good for the experience. Same thing happens on the internet. You order a product, and since the inventory is not updated, immediately, you go to the store to get the product, and they go, oh, we don't have it. Sorry, man. You're going to need to order something else. Well, you ordered that online for the convenience of just walking in and picking it up, and now you're standing there ordering at the counter, which is precisely the behavior that you were trying to avoid in the first place. So again, you're frustrated, they're frustrated, bad experience across the board. So with Smart Hub, we developed a technology that updates those consumer endpoints with that inventory as fast as the POS companies that have it will literally give it to us. So it's actually programmed so that it pings those POSs at whatever the highest rate they'll allow us to do it, and sends that information down to all these consumer endpoints. And here in a couple of weeks, we're actually going to have an API available. So if you're an e-commerce player other than us, the Art Janes, the Dutchies, Weed Maps, whoever of the world, or you're any other player that might want access to that data for your kiosk or whatever they may be, that you could use not just our end products, but our engine that keeps these things updated that's already integrated with 25 POSs. So I think for me, it was our challenge of the industry to solve, not just how do we solve it for ourselves, but how do we solve this massive problem for the entire industry. So that's what Smart Hub does.
Yeah, I mean, customer experience is huge, and then the technology, getting everything to be real time. Everybody needs everything real time. Nobody wants to wait, and nobody wants misinformation, right? So yeah, that's pretty awesome. Somewhere I read also about your data sets being included in AWS's data pool, one of the first cannabis companies to be put up there, or the first cannabis company to have that.
We're the first, and I think still the only, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So that's
a little about that. Yeah. So that has to do with our traffic data. We have the ability to see the number of visitors that go to all cannabis locations. We know how long they stay. We know how frequently they return. Based upon those dwell times and visit durations and frequency, we could actually categorize those people that go there. For example, a consumer, might be there less than 2 hours and maybe once a week, or somebody that works there is there for 4+ hours and they're there for 3 or more days a week. And a delivery person or a vendor might be there for 30 minutes or less, but like every day or every other day. So based upon, several parameters around that visit data, we're able to actually see how many people work in cannabis, how many people service cannabis with deliveries, how many people actually visit cannabis dispensaries. And then from there, if you correlate and lay on top of that POS data about transactions, you can see some really interesting things. Like you can start to develop trends on, how many people per transaction, which now with COVID, that's a 1-to-1. But before COVID, you would see areas like downtown Denver, Colorado, on average, there's like 6 people that go into the dispensary for each transaction they do, which means people travel in packs or herds because they're likely tourists. And so there's just a lot of really compelling information in that data set. And for those that want to go buy it, you get a chance to work with us, and we show you how, we can cut that data up and things we can do for you with that data.
Oh, that's really, really interesting because, there's data companies. I mean, it's already been like that for online retail where data companies are popping up here and there. But cannabis, there's data companies popping up all over the place. POS systems. We're just talking about how many POS systems there are in the cannabis space, but it's how to utilize that data is the big point. Why do you think that is in cannabis that we have 50 different ways to kind of go about the same thing?
Yeah, we were chatting about that before we came on air. And there's a couple things to point out there. Number one, POSs are fundamental. So there's obviously going to be some POS companies that compete. But I think there's more cannabis-based POS systems than there are like every other kind of POS system combined. And I know I'm being egregious, but I mean, I think you get the laughable side of the point. And I think that's a couple reasons. Number one is because most of everybody in this country are very passionate about this plant and they want to get involved. Number two, it's the birth of a new industry. And so things are moving so fast, the technology has to change and adapt to that. And so nobody, quite has it all figured out. Not me, not you, not anyone. And so there's all that opportunity that's created. But not only are there categories like POS where there's just an enormous amount of competition, which, by the way, I'm fortunate. We really don't have much competition on either side of the fence, retail solutions or marketing and advertising technology. But there's also companies sort of like mine that don't really exist in other parts of the world. And Ryan up at LeafLink, he's done a pretty impressive job. And I know he's got a few competitors. But typically, you don't even see technology that brokers the relationship between the retailers and the wholesalers in the rest of the world. That's hardly a thing in other industries. Those wholesalers and those retailers just have a direct relationship. They don't have an intermediary with a technology platform. And I think that's indicative of the fact that it's a brand new industry. And there was no way that these retailers and wholesalers, they were being strained to just conduct normal business under these abnormal set of regulations. And so if somebody can come along and make a tool that makes that process of their business easier, then they're like, hell yeah, I'll adopt that tool. And so there's this natural opportunity that doesn't occur with an industry that slowly grows, not one that just was prohibited and now it's not prohibited and boom, here it is. And for those things to spring up. And so there's a lot of businesses like that. Like you said, there's a lot of data companies. There's several different data companies, 3, 4, 5 that I can think of right off the top of my head. There's these wholesale B2B kind of companies. There's a million POS companies, it feels like. And so there's just, everybody's chasing that. How do we service the industry and do it better than the other guy? And nobody wants to go do that in the liquor business. It's already written in stone how that's going to work. I think it's actually legislated. That's what a racket that is. Let's hope cannabis doesn't turn into that racket. Maybe it already is. I don't know. But so that's why that is that it's such a moving target, and the industry really needed technology to help it, and that's why these things exist.
Yeah, I mean, it's in other industries, things are already, relationships are already established. They already have processes. Right now, it's kind of the Wild West, so whatever comes around, oh, that looks interesting. Let's try that. That looks interesting. They're hoping that people will adopt it. But I guess that being said, just you being a tech guy and marketing guy, where do you see it going? Where do you think the next big thing in cannabis tech is going to be?
So I don't know that it's a next big thing as much as it is that all these disparate pieces are going to start to be put together. I know I'm having a lot of, very serious partnership discussions with other people that in this value chain of handling the consumer in cannabis, they offer something that we don't. And so the partnerships aren't, hey, let's get you a client. You give me a client, I'll give you a client. They're much deeper level meaning there. And so I think, if I had to pick a couple of things about the future of cannabis, one is there'll be great consolidation. And companies like mine will likely merge with companies that sell similar but different technologies. And we will create this seamless experience for a consumer and they like it. And then on top of that, the business likes it because it's all a singularized platform. The same way I have Smart Hub that does a million things. Imagine if it had those few missing tools built in there. You'd only have to go to one place, right? And all of those things are handled. AdSuite, same way, all your marketing and advertising in one single solitary location. So thing number one, I think, is as far as prediction, you'll see great consolidation, and if not consolidation, heavy partnerships. And that's going to be driven a lot by Weed Maps, who's already very diversified and worth $1.5 billion. And by the way, when I first heard that, I was like, there's no way. And then when they disclosed their revenue figures, I was like, holy joke, they really are worth $1.5 billion. They finally disclosed the revenue. And so people are going to want to compete with that. And so I think the consolidation is going to happen. You're going to see us and others merge together or you won't survive. You're going to have to create a gigantic company. The second thing I really see happening, and it's already happening, and COVID sped it up, is the cannabis industry is really going to look like the food industry, the restaurant industry, and how it handles customers. And I say that because I've been making self-service kiosks. First one I built was like 2010 for a restaurant. This is before you ever saw any self-service kiosks in restaurants. And that technology is being adopted heavily. Digital menus were
Right.
adopted from point go, and I sold our first drive-through menus to places where it's legal to have a cannabis drive-through. And now you can do order online, curbside pickup. Man, this screams restaurant business. That's exactly what this is. We are, from a retail perspective, we are the restaurant industry selling consumer packaged goods instead of chicken sandwiches. That's exactly what we are. And so you're going to see it adopt more of those practices and steal from those industries the human resources that work in those industries to bring knowledge, the technologies, the methodologies, everything about that. If it's going to grow, you're going to watch those adoptions. So you're going to see more kiosks, more online ordering, more drive-thrus, more choices in ways that consumers get to interact with your company. And that's going to be a burden. And you're going to have to you're going to have to keep all that up to date, which is, again, why we made Smart Hub, because it is that center point of all those things. That's a big bet we have that this is where we're going.
Yeah, I mean, you can already see it with certain fast food restaurants that have mobile apps versus restaurants that don't.
Yeah.
Just the ones that do, I can already see lines that are forming outside the door for them to do pickups versus the ones where they have to actually walk in and place an order.
That's right.
Just because of COVID and I guess the mentality of change, do you think that the way dispensaries are going to be set up is going to change? Instead of these elaborate, crazy dispensaries, that was kind of the trend for a while. Do you think it's going to be
Like
more
Planet 13?
exactly, or is it going to be more low scale but more customer service driven, fast, in and out kind of style?
So interestingly enough, I think the answer is both. I think the one thing that won't exist in the capacity that it historically has is the middle of the road dispensary. And so, not that they won't exist, there'll just be less people decide to commit to that. Obviously, COVID can't last forever. We can't stay in a global pandemic for the rest of humanity. So eventually, that goes away. So let's just assume that's a thing. But we have to assume it is now. And so, I'm not going to give away names, but I work with some of the biggest cannabis companies in the world. And some of them had closed up stores that were really small shops scattered all over everywhere because geographically they're like the only cannabis dispensary anywhere nearby, and they weren't driving the kind of revenues they wanted, so they closed those shops. Well, COVID came, and all of a sudden they're dying for 400 square foot dispensaries that are essentially just pickup depots, if you will, for customers that are ordering online, or maybe they're coming to the store. And so you move from let's call it a medium-sized restaurant to a tiny little restaurant. But at the same time, people still need education, and there's still, I don't know, a touristy sort of attraction to it. Like if one of your relatives that doesn't consume cannabis finally decided they'd like to try it, they're going to want to go to a Planet 13 where there's a big experience and they can learn and they can ask lots of questions, like a learning center. And so I don't think there'll be less of those. I think there'll be more of those. And there'll be more of the small stores, and there's going to be less of the medium stores. So that medium level experience is going to shrink. That's one thing I think you're going to see. But if the medium level experience is going to exist, and I'm having this conversation right now with the biggest retailers in cannabis, you got to stop making people pick the way you want them to buy your product. Because they all had these ideas pre-COVID of here's how we do it. A guy walks out with a tablet and he walks you around and shows you and then takes your order. Well, what if I don't like that? What if I don't like guys walking around with tablets following me around? What if I know what I want and I just want to walk up to a kiosk, which I do, and I just want to tap buttons and you call me when my stuff's ready? Or what if I want a mobile app? Or what if I don't want to walk around with somebody and I want somebody to stand at a learning center with me and show me videos to educate me? And so you have to be open to all of the ways the cannabis consumer wants to be dealt with if you expect to get, a large swath of these cannabis consumers. And I think dispensaries are learning that. We can't force people to buy a product a certain way. We don't have that sort of power. There's way too many competitors. We've got to meet consumers at the way they want to buy things instead of making them meet us at the way we want to sell things. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. No, I totally could see that. Um, Now, let me just go back to Enlighten for a little bit.
Mhm.
You guys obviously have accomplished a lot. You have big plans for the whole ad network and growing that. But I guess in the grand scheme of things, what do you think the next step for you guys is? What's the big thing that's going to be the next thing for
Yeah,
Enlighten?
yeah. So I think it really the right now it's a lot of people spend a lot of time in the woodshed planning, right? Well, that's not my favorite place. I definitely enjoy dreaming and planning and all of that, but I'm one of those guys that likes to execute because the best laid plans are of mice and men. I think it was John Steinbeck that said that in the book of Mice and Men, but it's true. It doesn't take a lot of talent to make a plan. And I see a lot of people in cannabis making a lot of plans. It takes real talent to execute on that plan. So, we really thought this out with our Smarto platform. We really thought this out with our Ad Suite platform. We believe that we've absolutely got the two best pieces of technology for those independent tech stacks and what they can do. So right now, really for us, it's just about acquisition of customers for us and showing them how working with Enlighten benefits them more than any relationship that they've had historically, and executing on those promises. And so, really for us, I think at this point we've done the vast majority of the fundamental work. It's going to be incremental change, and we got some neat things coming out, like the Smart Hub API. That's definitely a neat thing. A lot of people have been wanting that, POS companies, and people want to use our Q boards for their in-store ordering or e-commerce, and now they can be exposed to those things. And then there's a lot of companies from an advertising perspective wanted access to things. So there's a lot of API work that we've done that's coming out. And then secondarily, we've got a lot of work going on the advertising side. I can't say a lot about. So there'll be some incremental changes. But Jason, I think it's about execution right now. We built incredible products. Now it's about helping customers go out and have success with it. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be selling, marketing, selling, educating our customers, showing them how things work. You're going to see some free trials of our products in the future. I'm that brave. I believe once you start using it, you won't be able to stop. And so, very few companies can even stay afloat offering a service like that. We're going to do it. And so really a lot of what you're going to see in the future from Enlighten is we built great tech. We're going to make it accessible for people is what we're going to do. Regardless of your budgets, regardless of the hurdles, who your POS provider is, any of those things, we're going to make it easy for you. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah, and I mean that's what Google's play was. You could start with as little as like $100 to get started, but look where they
Yeah.
ended up. I could see a
I
similar
thought,
thing.
next week when you and everybody else in the industry gets a little card in the mail that says, here's a free $100 to use in Enlighten's ad suite.
Right.
I thought Google might like that since they send me one once a week. So, I thought they would find that funny, but so, yeah, we're following that roadmap. We've got the cash to prove it to people, and then allow them to buy into the product once they've seen a result. And so we're going to do that. We're going to show people we're very serious about what we built, and they need to come give it a try. It works. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing these things.
Absolutely. I mean, I've always believed that, the longer you strategize, the longer you're not actually out there doing something. You know what I mean? So it's all, if your
Right.
competitor is strategizing and planning, then go right ahead, because that's as long as I'll be on the market and actually capturing some of that market share. So I guess for all those listeners that are planning their advertising and not
Right.
executing, how would they actually go and get started with you guys?
Yeah, you just go to adsuite.io, adsuite.io. Or you can go to getenlighten.io and find under the marketing section Ad Suite, but adsuite.io is a direct link. There's a coupon code right there on the site. You just sign up and enroll. It guides you through the process. Literally within 15 minutes, you could have an ad up and running on the internet or on a screen inside of these dispensaries in 15 minutes. We just need some basic information about who you are. We need a little bit of billing information. And then you go through the process of what kind of campaign are you wanting to run, where you want to run it, upload your creative takes a look at it, make sure it doesn't need any changes to it, and away we go. So 15 minutes, adsuite.io. And I think there's either $100 or $200 credit that's running there right now that's available on the internet. So you don't have to wait for the card in the mail. It's just our overarching promotion. We're just letting people know with those cards in the mail. Those coupon codes are not unique. They're for anyone that wants to use them. So It's easy to get started. Like I said, 15 minutes and you're rolling. And the interesting part is, people go, I don't think I can afford that. Literally, the low budget in my platform is $1. So you can literally invest $1 if you want to. Now, I would definitely throw a disclaimer that I don't think you're going to shake the world with $1. No doubt about that. But you can invest as little as you want into advertising on our platform. There are no minimums.
Well, that's awesome. Just for everybody listening out there who's in the cannabis industry, all the brands, from experience how hard it is to advertise in this space. These guys at Enlighten are just making it that much easier. So that's the place to go. Jeremy, I want to thank you again for coming on the show. It was awesome. Any final words?
Just that you guys keep up the great work you're doing. I know you all got some announcements of your sales that I won't let the cat out of the bag on. I'm as excited for you guys as I am for me, and I'm excited to watch your team grow and see what you guys are doing. And I look forward to having you on my show. I've got a podcast coming up. We're reopening the Cannabis with my big 43-foot mobile marijuana dispensary. We had a podcast in that. Since it's parked for COVID reasons, we're at least going to shoot it in my parking lot here at the office. And so I look forward to having you on the Cannabis podcast pretty soon, Jason, and getting to pick your brain about what's going on with Trichome.
That'd be awesome. We'll look forward to it. Once again, I want to thank Jeremy Jacobs for coming on to the show. For all your cannabis news and for other podcasts like this one, please visit www.trichomes.com. If you want to reach out to the show, email us at techandcannabis@trichomes.com. I'm Jason Kitamura, and thanks for joining us.